Hello and welcome to another Perplexed Parent Stress Student Guide for AQA A-Level Law. In this video I'll be dealing with tort law and the exam paper for that topic and just giving a brief overview of what tort law is all about. Obviously your son or daughter will have a far more detailed level of knowledge, hopefully, and their understanding will be much deeper. And feel free to check the basics with them by asking them to explain torts, as this could be a means to help their revision. So the areas I'm going to cover include the assessment objectives, the exam structure, the areas in tort law, and the scenario requirements. So just like human rights and criminal law, the exam is marked using 3 assessment objectives, and these should be pretty familiar by now if you've watched other videos in the series. In case you haven't, here's a quick overview again. So A01 substantive law is about the rules of the torts that enable us to determine when a person has liability or when they have a defence against that liability. So it's covering the general principles. A02 is looking at how the laws would be applied to a given scenario, and often there'll be 2 or 3 different issues to discuss in the scenario, and mostly they're disguised cases. So if your son or daughter knows their cases well, they'll have a good chance of setting out the right legal principles because they'll recognise the case. And the third area is the non-substantive law. So this covers issues to do with the lawmaking process and the legal system. Questions on the lawmaking and legal system appear across all 3 papers, and there are also slightly longer questions on issues like fault, justice and morality. So on then to the exam, which is 2 hours in duration and is marked it's made up of a range of different questions, and here's a quick summary of this, and feel free to pause the video at any point if you want time to process what you're seeing. So you can see range of different questions, increasing in the number of marks allowed and increasing in the length of time allowed, and it is generally recommended that the longer questions be done first because that way you can maximise the marks. So in tort law then, we are looking at how legal relationships between claimants and defendants are established when some injury or damage has been caused by a negligent act, and the defences that can be used to reduce the level of liability or fault. There are 7 torts that are studied at A-level, and 5 of these require the proving of fault, and 3 of them are strict liabilities. So again, do ask your son or daughter to explain the concept of strict liability to check their understanding of the concept. So the fault-based torts, a judge will decide on the balance of probability whether the claimant has a genuine claim and whether the defendant is in fact liable for the harm or damage. And strict liability, that's a little bit more complex, and I'll possibly deal with that in a different video. So these kind of cases are heard in a civil court, and the judge sits alone to decide the liability, the damages awarded, and entitlement to legal cost. So within tort law then, the basic idea that needs to be grasped, and the one on which the rest of the understanding hinges, is that of negligence. And negligence has 3 elements, and these are duty of care, a breach of that duty, damage caused by that breach, and if all these are there, that leads to a claim for negligence. And duty of care means, is the harm reasonably foreseeable? Is there a relationship or proximity between the parties? And is it fair, just and reasonable to impose a duty of care on the claimant? On the defendant rather. A breach of duty means that the defendant has fallen below the required standard of care that's appropriate to the degree of risk, and the damage caused means that the defendant's breach has caused that damage, and that damage was reasonably foreseeable. So move on to the second video then to deal with some of the more basic ideas and a guide to how to approach the scenario questions.